January 10th, 1984. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Charles Alexander Long. Sir, where were you born?
I was born in a log cabin out from Alto, Texas.
When's your birthday?
22nd of August, 1881.
Who was your father?
Reverend Martin Doherty Long.
And who was your mother?
Caledonia Sophronia Hamilton Long.
Where were your parents from?
My father was born and reared in Choctaw County, Alabama. And my mother was born and reared in Cherokee County, Texas. And I was born in the same place where she was.
Mm-hmm. Your father was a minister?
Yes, yes.
Tell me about your father.
My father was a strain of Longs that came into Pennsylvania through Abingdon, Virginia. My grandfather was born in Abingdon, Virginia. They drifted down through Tennessee into Georgia. There my grandfather married, and they lived in Sumter and Choctaw counties, Alabama, and Meridian. Let's see, what is that? The Mississippi. The two counties in Mississippi across the line. Those four counties were full of our people. And they were anti-slavery. They refused to own slavery. But uncles of mine fought in the Confederacy because they were defending the rights of the states to leave the Union if they wanted to. They were not defending slavery with that. But they were against slavery.
Were you told any stories about the Civil War?
Were
you told any stories about the Civil War?
Some, yes, yes.
Do you remember? Could you tell me what the stories were?
Well, not too much. I don't hear too many of them.
Was your grandfather in the Confederate Army?
No.
Mm-hmm.
No. They were too old.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother's two brothers, the Hamiltons, were in the Confederate Army. And my father had two brothers also in the Confederate Army.
What about your father?
He was too young.
Too young.
See, he was born in 49,
Mm-hmm.
and he was not quite old enough.
What was your grandfather's name?
Thomas Long.
Thomas Long. What kind of work did he do?
He was a mechanic, blacksmith, and farmer.
You ever help him around the blacksmith shop?
I never saw a grandparent.
You never saw a grandparent?
Never saw.
Okay. You said you were born in a log cabin.
Yeah.
What kind of chores did you do around the house as a child?
Well, I left the log cabin before I was big enough to do anything.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you move?
We moved to, that was in the country out from Alto, and my father was farming then. Then he went to the parsonage in Burkeville, Tennessee. And there I did the chores about the house, brought in the wood and little things like that, because we didn't have any help in the house. We just did our own housework.
So you moved from Texas to Tennessee?
No, I moved from Texas to Burkeville, Texas.
Texas, okay.
That's in Newton County, county seat, out down on the Sabine River. And then after 3 years, he moved to Hemp Hill, for north, in the county north of that, and was there until 1891, was he transferred to Oklahoma, brought the family to Oklahoma.
What part of Oklahoma did you come to?
Well, we first had a stay near Britton, then a few months down on the river south of Council Grove at a place that Reverend A.J. Worley had they called Queen's Camp. On his farm he had a little school for girls. And then my father made the race in the opening of the Cheyenne Arapaho country the 19th of April, 1892, and we moved to the claim northwest of Union City, where we stayed till 1901 when we moved to Norman and built the house on Chautauqua Avenue that now Dr. Northstand owns. He still owns the house we built in 1901. Still.
Can you tell me about the trip to Oklahoma?
Huh?
Can you tell me about the trip to Oklahoma in 91?
91. We left Hemp Hill, Texas in a wagon and crossed the Sabine River, it was 20 miles away, headed for Robeline, Louisiana. We spent that one night, we camped out, we got some leaves together and made a bed in the fire under the trees one night. Then got to Robeline next day, and there at Robeline we took the train at night and traveled all night from Robeline up through Marshall, Oklahoma, Texas, into Fort Worth. We got into Fort Worth long sometime in the morning. We waited there in the Santa Fe Depot in Fort Worth till night. Then we took the train and got into Oklahoma City in the early morning hours. And there in Oklahoma City, an aunt of mine that lived out 9 miles out in the country, for whom the Wickline Methodist Church in Midway City is named, she met us, my mother's baby sister. We went there, and my father went to attend the Methodist annual conference in session at the city. And from there, we went to Britton and took up that other route.
What was your first impression of Oklahoma City?
Well, it was just a nice village, about 3,000 people. There were mud streets, and a mud lane from down what's now Robinson and a rickety bridge, anti-Godwin across the street. I've driven wagons across that a number of times, that anti-Godwin rickety bridge where Robinson has such a fine cement bridge now. Yeah, I've driven right across that. Yeah.
What was the name of the church in Britton that your father took over?
Well, he had the country work.
Country work.
It was country work, yes.
Okay, what is country work?
Well, he really held services in the schoolhouses. It was called Edmund Circuit, but it was in different, I don't know just where they were. We didn't stay there but about 2 months, so we stayed in the home of another preacher who was away. We stayed in his home 2 months. Then we moved down to Queen's Camp with Worley. Now Worley, A.J. Worley, was a pastor, organizer of the Methodist Church in Oklahoma City that is now St. Luke's. A.J. Worley.
What was he like, Mr. Worley?
He was
what kind of man was he, Mr. Worley?
he was a portly, handsome gentleman. He was a neat, intelligent, fine-looking man, and just as fine as he was looking, and a fine Christian man. He was a very fine man. Wore Prince Albert coat, and after the organization of the church, in 1892, he was what we called then the presiding elder. Now they call him district superintendent. He was my father's first presiding elder, and we thought so much of him. After Queen's Camp, he organized Highgate College in Norman, on the east side. Womack has written that up in his book, you know. That was a girls' school, and Womack tells some of the queer things. He required his teachers to wear Prince Albert coats on the street and all sorts of those things. But he had a yearning for education of girls. And the sad part is, I saw Brother Worley when he was 18, wearing that Prince Albert coat, looked like it had been dragged through a mud hole. And he'd get lost on the street. It was at Durant at the annual conference at the time of statehood. He was there. He'd get lost on the street. We just had to guide him in. He had finally went to that had been Highgate College to spend his last days in this age softening of the brain. He wasn't loud, he was quiet, but one of the finest men I've ever known.
What was his personality like? What kind of personality did he have, Mr. Worley?
Well, he was well educated, and he was thoroughly prepared in his work as a minister, and was an able administrator, a friend. He was a man that you like to know.
Can you tell me what downtown Oklahoma City looked like in '91? Can you describe Main Street?
It was a street with ordinary storefronts, one-story buildings, and unpaved street.
What were the major stores at that time?
I don't remember. We never lived there. We went out to my aunt's home out east a mile north, east on 23rd, just across a mile east of where across the river was where she lived. Okay. And we stayed there till the conference was over, and we moved to the house up near Edmond, near Britton, where we spent 2 months.
Go ahead.
2 months. Then we went to the Queen's Camp.
What kind of house did your aunt live in?
She at that time just had a frame house. But later she built a brick house. And near Chaddock was the post office.
Yeah. How big was Britton at that time?
Oh, it was just a little village. Half a dozen stores or such a matter. It wasn't much.
Who was Britton named for?
I don't know.
Okay. Now, where exactly is Queen's Point?
Queen's Camp.
Yeah.
You know where Council Grove?
Yes, sir.
That area. Okay. Well, down on the river, south of Council Grove, on the river. You had to go around the grove and get in there to get to the place. His property was on the river.
Why was it named Queen's Camp?
I don't know why he gave it that name.
And you stayed there till 1905?
No, we stayed there only a few months.
Yeah.
That we went there about Christmas of 1891, and on May the 2nd of 1892 we moved from there to Union City, to the claim.
What was your Christmas like in 92?
92. We didn't have much Christmas.
Didn't have much Christmas.
We had our stockings, and in the stockings we had an orange, an apple, 2 or 3 Brazil nuts, some filberts, some almonds, and a little bit of candy, and a little toy of some kind. I believe there was a little tin trumpet, maybe. That was much about.
Did you have a Christmas tree?
No.
No.
No. Just that was in the home. We didn't have public program then.
Why did you move to Union City?
To the claim. He made the race.
Okay, the run of 92?
Yeah, the Cheyenne Apple Country was opened the 19th of April, 1892. He made the race, staked the claim, and we moved to the claim.
Did you go with him for the race?
No.
Did he talk about making the run?
Yes.
Tell me about what he said.
Well, from Union City west, the next cross line, about a mile, was where the cemetery is. Half a mile north, on the half-section line, he went across a fraction that is in old Oklahoma, and the other fraction was to be opened up. He went to that point and had in view from the maps the first full section on the north of that half-section line. It was the northwest corner of that section. And he raced across that fraction just west of the 98th meridian. He raced across that and over to the upper side to stake the claim. And he rode to the sorrel pony barebacked, carried a flag on a pole, and when he got to across the line, he tapped that in the ground and then stopped and stood by it. And another man on the upper end came in later and staked, and we had a contestant. So we had to but the father was first to get to it, first to stake it, first to move on it. And
how did your father prove that he was first?
he had people that saw.
Okay, he had witnesses.
They had witnesses,
Yeah.
and they witnessed it with each other.
Yeah. Where did your father get the map?
The government furnished map,
Okay.
had maps.
Okay.
The maps were they were divided in the surveyor's township section lines, all laid out.
Okay, and you moved on the claim.
Moved on the claim the 2nd of May of 1892. And lived there. We held that till and improved it up. Then we sold in 1901 and moved to Norman and built the house on what's now Chautauqua.
What kind of house did you live in on the claim?
A box house, 12 by 14, dug one apartment near the underground with steps that went in from the outside into that. That was our kitchen apartment. and then steps from the outside that went up to a floor above, and the pipe from the kitchen stove went up with a drum that heated the upper story, and it was a box house that with the boards slatted over, and no seating. No seating.
How many lived in the house?
There were 6 of us.
6.
I was the oldest. My brother under me 4 years younger, and then a sister 2 years younger, and a sister still under her, just a little Todd.
Mm-hmm. Did your father farm on the claim?
Well, yes, he farmed and he was pastor too. So we had some experiences on that. I was in 1892. I was 11 years old that year in August, and my father, the church wanted the pastors to live on the grounds, in their pastoral charges, but because of the claims and all, they let him travel. Well, he'd go off on Saturday and get back Monday. And at one time he'd leave Friday morning and get back Tuesday afternoon. Well, you know that when you've got the livestock and all on a farm, you know things can happen. So Mother and I had to run that farm, and we had to meet those emergencies. And because of that, my mother and I dealt together perfectly. We formed a team, and we formed a strength of friendship that was unusual. Mm-hmm. I wasn't tied to her apron string, but we were companions. But with that strength that stayed with us the rest of our life. And then when Sunday came, we would drive 2 miles and 3/4 to town. I drive a farm wagon. It would take my mother and my brother and sisters. We'd go in a farm wagon. I drove the team. I was a man of the farm, and then that was in '92 that we got the place. He hired 10 acres broke by a man that had a sod plow. The next year, spring of the year came, he bought a team of horses and a 16-inch sod plow, and I drove that team and used that sod plow and broke out 60 acres of that sod land before I was 12 years old. I was a team hand from then on.
Yeah. What is the difference between a sod plow and a walking plow?
A walking plow, well, a turning plow we call them. Mm-hmm. The turning plow has a moldboard that comes up quick and throws the soil over and pulverizes it. The sod plow is long and kind of slender-like, and there were 2 kinds. The favorite one was a rod plow. The share, the steel share, had to be sharpened 2 or 3 times a week. That would cut the roots, and there was a cutter on the side that would cut a strip, and then at the back of the share, rods would come back and make a gentle turn, and turn that over in a strip together just as much as possible. Didn't try to break it up, because they wanted it to fall where the roots would rot. And if you broke it up, that puts in there and it would not, but turned over and lap, the heat, moisture, would cause the roots to rot. That, so that in the fall of the year, then we'd take the turning plow that would break it up. And it would take about a couple of years to get the soil loosened up so that the regular plowers would shape it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you plow with horses or mules?
Horses. We
Yeah.
had 2 black horses.
Ever plow with mules?
I have used mules some, but yes, we've had most of ours with horses.
Do you prefer plowing with horses?
Uh,
Do you prefer plowing with horses?
well, I got along with both of them. I didn't have any trouble.
Mm-hmm. What kind of crops did you raise?
Ours was wheat.
Wheat?
We wheat farmers.
Mm-hmm.
We had our land was not very good for. We had some land that was sandy enough for corn,
Yeah.
and we had about 10 or 12 acres of corn, and used to feed us through the year, just for home use.
When you broke out the 60 acres, how many acres could you plow in a day? Could you break out?
I don't remember. It was pretty slow.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty slow because you only get about 14 inches. Even if the 16-inch plow, you won't get more than about 14 inches of soil, and you can't go very fast. I don't, but it took me up to the rain season before I got that finished.
Mm-hmm. Where did you start your school?
I started the school first in Vanderbilt, Texas, and was there a time. Then I had a few days of school at that Britton place and down at Queen's Camp. Then out on the farm, we were in the school district. First, the schoolhouse was about a mile and a half from us, but they organized it 3/4 of a mile from east of where our house was, a half mile east of our corner. We called it the Lone Star School. Mm-hmm. And I went there. My father was on the board. And that school continued. And there I finished my public school course, and I was one of the first. I got a diploma from the public school, and my diploma had the names of 2 state superintendents and the name of 2 county superintendents.
How come?
Well, the state superintendent, one was the state superintendent, and then he was something else. And in the 2 functions, it was on that. The same way with the county superintendent. So I had that diploma is in my files in Duke University now.
Duke University?
Duke is.
Yeah.
My files, my archives are in Duke.
Mm-hmm.
They're for consultation.
Yeah.
It's on file.
You moved to Norman in what year?
I went to, well, I'll begin a little bit back. That was 1907. Wait a minute, 1897 that I graduated I finished the primary. In January of 1898, I went to Hargrove College in Ardmore, Oklahoma, Indian Territory. Hargrove was one of 3 schools that the Methodists had in the Indian Territory. Hargrove in Ardmore, and in Muskogee there was another, and in Herald Institute in Veneta. They did splendid work in the Indian Territory. Statehood came with free schools. They were supported by private funds. They were gradually squeezed out. And Highgate College in Norman was there when the university grew up, one at each end of the town. They were rivals. They were not rivaling one another. They were always friendly, but the school had to depend on charging fees for support, because it's hard to compete with the University of Free Education. And gradually, that's why those schools were discontinued.
Can you describe Hargrove College, what the school was like?
When I went there, we had one brick building that had classrooms on 3 levels, and when I suppose it would be more or less like a junior college today, but from primary on through there, and that was the classroom. They built another that was, while I was there from January 1988 to 1898 to June of '99. They were building another classroom building when I left. It wasn't quite finished. They had a girls' dormitory where the president of the school lived with his family and had the boarding department. And
It burned?
it burned, yeah.
What year did it burn?
That was in, let's see, it was in '99.
What was your curriculum? What did you study?
It was the regular, about the regular high school course.
Who was in charge of the school?
His name was I can't call his name now, but he was a good educator.
Yeah. Can you describe him? What was he like?
Well, he was a rather portly man. He wore one of those other coats. He had a family of girls, mighty nice family. Johnson, J.T. Johnson was his name, and he's buried in the cemetery there.
And you left the school in '99.
Yes, I left the school in June of '99.
Where did you go then?
Norman.
Norman.
We rented. We moved. The family moved and rented a house there in Norman. One had one place, and then the next year rented another. Then in 1901, we built the house on Chautauqua that Dr. Norstand owns now.
What's the address on Chautauqua?
I don't know whether, let's see.
Well, that's okay.
If you can find Norstand,
There.
find Norstand in.
(722) Chautauqua.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the house we built was a frame house, and we sold it later to a professor of Vanderbilt, of the university.
Yeah, let me.
And he moved the frame house back to the back of the lot and built a brick house in front.
Mm-hmm.
And that number is of the brick house, but that other house is there. It's been redone, but it's there yet.
It was built in 1901.
One, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you attended the University of Oklahoma.
From September 1899, 2 years of the preparatory course that they had then the 4 years college.
Mm-hmm. What did you study?
I studied industry. I made my decision for the ministry when I was just before I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
I never swerved from that. I majored in geology under Professor Gould. But Gould was such a man. If there was ever a great man, Charles Newton Gould was he. A fine Christian gentleman, well informed in the Bible, used it adeptly everywhere, and intelligent, and a friend of men. I admired Dr. Gould. Well, I was there when he came. And he came to the university. Dr. Boyd invited him to come. His first year, 19 and 20 to 21, he got $400 for the year. And he had his desk in Dr. Van Vliet's office. He had his classes in wherever he could find a wherever there was a vacancy in the classroom. Of course, they established that class would be regular there, but they were scattered. That was his start in the university.
What about Dr. Boyd?
One of the finest educators we've ever had. I admire, I've been thinking of the men he called to the faculty. He got good men on that faculty. And listen, he had his house down there at the end of the beginning of the sidewalk, his own house. He had $250 a month for his salary. The professors, $125 a month.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe the professors he brought to the university?
Well, he had there Dr. DeBar, one of the finest of chemists, and one time Dr. DeBar was the whole pharmaceutical faculty for pharmacy. He was a chemist and a fine. He was a positive man. He wanted things to be done just so, like chemical form. Dr. Buchanan was a jovial man, a good-humored man, had history. Professor Elder was mathematics. He had an accident, lost his toes, both on the stubs, but he rode a bicycle. He was mathematics and surveying. And Paxton was Latin and Greek, but later Sturgis came in and took over most of the Latin. The girl that came in for take the music married McGuire, the hardware man. And then later on we had Dr. Gould, Professor Gould came in and another was C. Sturgis, and the professor of English that went away fired for smoking cigarettes. And English 1 was the course that everybody dreaded. 5 times a week and write a theme every Friday, and it was hard. But his course is being used every time I compose a paragraph. It was there.
What was the major building on campus when you were going there?
When I first went there was that original one building, and that burned.
Did that burn while you were there?
That was the first.
Did you
4 acres of land, and that building cost $35,000.
Did you have classes in that building?
Yes.
What was the inside of that building like? Can you describe it?
Well, it was cut up into classrooms where the front had the president's offices and
What floor was his office on?
it was on the main floor.
Mm-hmm.
on the main floor, and then there was a floor above it. The floor above it had a chapel and classrooms. And the library, I believe the library was upstairs, yeah. And down in the basement, they had the heating and sanitary. They had the place to burn the refuse from toilets. And there, took it up in the air. They didn't have.
What was in the tower?
There wasn't anything up in the tower.
Mm-hmm. Why did the building burn?
Who knows? There was a suspicion. They were building another building, and there was some skullduggery. And there was a suspicion that there was fire, that they thought that would not be accepted. And to force them to accept it, there was suspicion that there was arson. But they never knew. They never proved anything.
Did they build the Carnegie Library while you were there?
Yes, yeah. That was a great blessing to us. I was there when they built that library.
Did they have a big dedication for the building?
Yes, I think they did.
Do you remember it?
I don't remember much.
Can you tell me just what your average day at the university was like?
8 o'clock in the morning was 8 o'clock and 8:50 classes. Following that was chapel. And everybody went to chapel up on the top floor. Dr. Boyd was in charge of it. He led it out, and a few of the professors did, and others came in. And without being required, many of the faculty were back there attending chapel. That in a government school, nobody objected. Nobody objected because those lessons that were given were such good, prominent lessons that they were worthwhile.
Okay, after chapel.
2 more classes, and then lunch. Let's see. One more class, maybe twice, and then lunch. Then 2 or 3 classes in the afternoon. Of course, we didn't have classes all that time. We had about 15, 16 classes a week scattered over that time. There were 5-hour classes and 4-hour classes, some small. It depended on our enrollment, what class, and the times we were off, we'll go to the library to study.
How many students were attending then?
When I graduated in 1905, I don't remember exactly, but there was approximately 450 students. More than half of them were preparatory. Now that's how it was divided up. And I've said this, when they started, of course they didn't have students at all for college work. They had to have college professors. They had to organize the preparatory school for double purpose, to give the students an opportunity to prepare for it and to give the teachers something to do to earn their money. It served a double purpose. I had 5 professors of the college grade teaching classes in the secondary department at different times, 5 of them.
Of course, you lived at home, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay. The students that didn't live in Norman, where did they stay?
They in boarding houses.
Okay.
We didn't have any, and they were private boarding houses.
Did your
And then
family-
the government began to sort of control the boarding houses so they'd be approved. Then came the government-owned boarding houses.
Did your family board any students?
Yes, we had 2 or 3 at a time. Yeah,
What did your family charge to board a student?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
It was very almost nothing.
Yeah.
Now,
Can you tell me about your commencement exercises?
uh,
Your commencement exercises in 1905?
the commencement exercises in 1905, on Sunday, we had the baccalaureate sermon. A minister from somewhere would be invited to deliver the baccalaureate sermon, a very solemn occasion, very important religious occasion, but absolutely free of any bias. Of course, it was Protestant in its not Catholic, but it was absolutely acceptable to everybody. Then, during the week, different exercises. One night would be the fine arts, the musical program, another night would be something else, another night the senior class play, and then on Friday, a solemn assembly in which, well, very much like the graduation exercise, there would be a baccalaureate address by some prominent statesman or prominent person, and the issuing of the diplomas.
Who gave the speech at your baccalaureate?
I don't remember who it was.
And what school did you graduate from? What college?
It was geology.
Geology?
Yeah.
And what day of the week did you have your exercises?
It's on those. Well, our graduation was on Friday.
Friday?
Yeah, the graduation. But we didn't have it divided up in schools that way. At that time, we had the School of Fine Arts. That was the music department. We had the School of Pharmacy, and then the rest of it in other. There were 8 bachelors, 2 masters, 8 pharmaceutical chemists in my class. And that's how big the class it was.
Mm-hmm.
And about 450 students, most of us still in the secondary department, 3 years, but the secondary department, as I said, with 3 years they did what the high schools are not doing now in 4, because there are too many extracurricular activities.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember anything about the baccalaureate speech?
No, I don't remember too well,
Mm-hmm.
too far back.
After college, what did you do?
After college, I went to the county Teachers Institute, 4-week institute, got my 3rd degree diploma. Couldn't get any, we couldn't get it. That's where you had to start, 3rd degree, and then 3rd grade. 2nd year you could get a 2nd. In the 3rd year you could come to 1st. That was the state law. Not state, it was territory. I got my 3rd degree certificate and taught in Lexington High School that year. And after 1 year of teaching in Lexington High School, I entered the conference work and became a pastor and went to Grand, Oklahoma Territory.
Where is Grand?
It's a now alfalfa patch on the South Canadian River south of Arnett. It was then the county seat of Day County of the territory. And the counties straddled that river coming out of Texas, where the Antelope Hills are. About half the county is on the south side of the river, where those high rises come up, cut off without warning, and cut off half the county for so days and days at a time, and the dangers of a full-day crossing at statehood. I was out there at that time. We requested the convention to make that the county line and redistrict it. Well, Ellis County is formed on the north, and I never can remember one on the south. But the county, and Grand, that was down on the north side of the river at that line, of course, that lost its claim for the county seat, and it was moved to Arnett.
What was Arnett like at that time?
Arnett was, I believe it was a store and 1 or 2 houses.
Mm-hmm. Who was it
No,
named?
that is, no, when I first went out there. But they had built up some other, they had built up quite a nice little town. And Arnett and Shattuck fought it out. Shattuck, because it had the railroad and all, so it had that Santa Fe Road going to Amarillo. And Arnett was the geographical center, but didn't have a railroad. Well, we pulled for Arnett because it was near the center, and we had promised, and the road had begun building from about Fort Supply, maybe farther up, down through there, through Arnett, to Oklahoma City. Statehood came, and Bledsoe was the secretary in charge of that work. And the agent of the Santa Fe came in and said something. He was sitting with his feet up on the table. So he must say, you do this and you do that, you do the other. Here? That's right here. He went out, telegraphed the house, everything. The railroad hasn't been built since. Mr. Bledsoe, big somebody, showing off and ruined that building. Well, we'd already voted it. Shattuck would perhaps have been a better place, but Arnett's a good town.
Can you remember some of the prominent people in Arnett?
Not so much in Arnett, no.
Ever hear the name Ruprecht?
Who?
Ruprecht?
Rupert, I think I remember it. Yeah.
Did you know the family?
I think I didn't know them very well, no.
Yeah. Okay. Let me regress. Do you remember the Spanish-American War?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about it.
Well, we were on the farm, and a cousin of mine spent the summer with us, and we listened to the reports of the war, and we're always anxious to hear what they were, and we saw one soldier camp that the soldiers were pretty much displeased. They weren't getting over to the war, they were being held out.
Where was the camp?
I don't remember now just where it was, but we was in that neighborhood here in the city.
When the battleship Maine was sunk or blown up, were there any reactions to it by the people around Union City?
I don't remember. Of course, we repelled it.
Yeah. Did
But
you want to
there was
join
no-
up? Did you want to join the Army at that time?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't old enough.
Mm-hmm. What about when the war ended? When Spain surrendered?
Well, we just took it in stride.
Was there a big celebration?
No, no. Just news that came over through the press.
Tell me about Statehood Day.
Uh,
Statehood Day. Statehood Day, when Oklahoma became a state in 1907.
1907, I was attending the annual conference in Durant at that time when the proclamation was made declaring it a state.
Were there big celebrations in Durant?
They had celebration, yes, but I don't remember anything special.
Mm-hmm. What about the Depression of 1907?
It was pretty hard.
Tell me about it.
I just remember we were scarce of things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember too much.
Can you tell me about what you were doing between Statehood Day and World War I, 1907 to 1917? What were you doing then?
During statehood, in 1907, I was in pastor at Grand, Oklahoma, and Kent Bruce wrote up some time ago, Grand, a ghost town. I wrote Kent Bruce a letter telling him about the religious work there, and he wrote me up as a circuit rider, and he gave me one of those gravens. And that put me in touch with our neighbors here in the city. Well, that was in from 1908 was when they moved from Graham to Arnett. I left the pastorate in the fall of 1908 and went to Nashville, Tennessee to Vanderbilt University for my theological work. And I was there in Vanderbilt for 3 years. I got my Bachelor of Divinity from Vanderbilt in 1911. there I met my future. She was getting ready to go to China, but we went to Brazil with me. And I graduated in June of 1911. The 8th of July 1911, we married, and the 20th of July we sailed from New York to Rio de Janeiro for our missionary work there.
What was life like in Brazil?
Well, many things, of course, are just like it is here. But we were impressed with policing and taxation and customs like that. The police, you had to open your business doors at a certain hour, couldn't open before, and had to be closed at another time. Them days, if you were caught open, you were fined. You paid taxes on the income and not on ad valorem. And they good many things of that kind that were different.
How long did you stay in Brazil?
We were in Brazil. We landed there the 6th of August, 1911. We sailed our first furlough the 28th of December, 1918. So we were in Brazil at the time of World War I. And in 1915, November 1915, well, first, my work was among in the slum area of Rio de Janeiro and the favelas there, and with seamen's work. Then I went to pastorate work out in some of the country towns. Then in 1915, I was elected president of our Hargrove College in 284, our oldest boys' school, and it also had girls. I was in charge there for 6 years, and while there I taught theology in the theological departments and managed the business part and straightened out a good many kinks that had got started up. And from the college, I was transferred to the pastorate of the local church and built what they called later the Methodist Cathedral that gave name, and that church had been trying for years to build a new building and hadn't done anything. But we had gotten some additional help from the United States in what we call the centennial, 100 years of mission and missionary work in the church, that they raised funds to reinforce the mission fields of such hard conditions. They needed reinforcement. I got some help from that, and I built that church. And that church, next year, it will celebrate 100 years of its organization, not of the building, but of the organization first. And they're going to hold it on the 13th of May. Well, the 13th of May in Brazil is famous. It's the day that the Princess Isabella, sitting on the throne in the absence of her father, the Emperor Dom Pedro II, she issued a decree for the slaves without a shot. That angered the slave owners,